Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Mirror of Intimacy webinar. I'm Dr. Alex Katehakis. Today is Monday, August 7th. We are deep into summer, and our topic today is Philia. And before I get started, I was thinking about what a beautiful topic this is for summer, because summer is a time when we do so much with friends and family. So I want you to think about all the people that you hold close, all the people that you love dearly, and all the other creatures that support you in your life, whether it's pets or animals that visit you in your yard, or anything of that nature, like all of the beings and creatures that you hold dear. So I also want to remind you, as always, to type your questions into the Q&A box. And when you do that, I'll answer them. Please don't use the chat box for your questions. That's there strictly to give you information about URLs, books, resources that we have. As you see now, you'll see that our intake line is there, information about my workbook. If you have questions about services we have or services we can point you to in your part of the country or the world, that's where what you'll find in the Q&A. And to also remind you to please leave any of your book reviews or comments on Amazon for Mirror of Intimacy or Sexual Reflections or What Turns You On. Let us know what you love about these books, how you're using them, how you're sharing them. It means a lot to me to hear from you as you support the work that I do here and the work that we do at CHS, that all the staff does at CHS. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscribe button below. That way you won't ever miss a post. And you can also keep up with what we're doing by following me on Instagram at Alex Katehakis or at Center for Healthy Sex. Today's quote is from Erich Fromm. He writes, if a person loves only one other person and is indifferent to the rest of his fellow men, his love is not love, but a symbiotic attachment or an enlarged egotism. And so let's go back to that also, because that's, quite a headful that he's saying, that if a person only loves one other person, how can that be possible? Other than we are extremely isolated. And if you feel like you only have one friend, which is certainly better than no friend, or there's only one person in your life that you love, I want you to take stock of that today as we talk about this topic. He writes that that person is indifferent to the rest of his fellow men, and I would add women today, but he's indifferent to humanity, to people, to making connections. And so his love is not love, but a symbiotic attachment, meaning in some ways, if we only have one friend, or we use our primary love relationship, our partner, our spouse, our husband or wife, as the only person to get all of our needs met, then that depth of neediness and symbiosis is too much. It's too cloying, it's too parasitic, it's too much as an adult. We should be getting our needs met from a myriad of different people and places and pets. So it's either, he's saying, symbiotic or an enlarged egotism, like somehow our egos are so out of whack that we think we only need one person, that we are, unique, and that we don't need community. And community is crucial to our well-being. In fact, now I think the research is saying that it's not learning a new thing every year that keeps us from getting Alzheimer's. It's the degree to which we are isolated. And as our worlds shrink and we don't have friends or family or loved ones or people to talk to, our brains start to, this is not completely accurate, but they start to solidify or calcify. In some ways it's accurate because we're not growing our brains. We're not stretching ourselves. And relationships are hard. They take work. They are painful and deeply gratifying also. So let's take a look at this word philia. In Greek, the word philo means friend. And the word thus felice is kiss. So these are all related, this idea of love and kindness and closeness. So the Greeks named this kind-hearted love philia. And it's the love we feel for friends, for family and community, as well as for lovers we truly like. So in a deep love relationship, we feel like our lover, our partner, is our closest friend. And that is a profound level of intimacy. And oftentimes people that struggle with intimacy will have lovers, but sometimes there is a tinge of usury in that, because it's about sex and getting all of our needs met from that person, and there's a cloying aspect to it. Whereas in a healthy relationship, our lovers, our wives, our husbands are also our best friends, our deepest confidants. They're the people that we can trust, that we rely on. And we also have deep friendships and family members and community that we can rely on, so that we don't ever have to be alone on this journey. So philia is Platonic, yet it is deeply emotional. And it lights up our hearts when we meet an old friend, and it inspires us to make new friends. And even elephants bugle when they're reunited with their friends. They bugle, they stomp their feet. They also, I think, pee and poop is what I've read. They're just so excited to reunite with their buddies, with who they know, this deep filial love, that they're in this excitatory state. And think about when you're getting together for a friend, whether it's lunch or a movie or someone you haven't seen in a long time, and sometimes even when we are meeting friends, we might do so begrudgingly, like, oh, I don't really have time to do this, or I'm not sure I really want to go to this place, but I do want to see my friend. And then after we have a meal or a conversation or a walk, whether it's a hike in the woods or a walk on the beach, we feel so relieved that we did that, because we feel connected again. And the quality of the conversation is what connects us. And also sometimes just the presence of being in another human being, so that we don't feel so isolated, so that we feel like a member of the human race again. And certainly the pandemic stole those connections from us. Many of us desperately clung to relationships by way of Zoom. Others, were willing to take the risk and go on socially distanced walks. But we quickly saw how desperately and importantly we need other human beings. And studies even show that the little micro connections we make during the day, the smile we share with a stranger when we open the door or get on an elevator, or the moment we have with a cashier when we're checking out from the grocery store, or with our dry cleaner, are moments that are essential to our well-being every day, because again, it connects us to our humanity, to our community. People sometimes will ignore philia, or they will put it on the back burner for the more exciting Eros, the more erotic love, or the spiritually superior Agape, which is unconditional love. And we've all been guilty of doing this, that where we have a really good friend and we have plans with that friend, but we just met someone new who's a possible love relationship, and that person calls at the last minute and asks us to go for a walk or to a movie, and we cancel on our friend. And that dopamine, that excitatory, that possibility of love and limerence will override the deeper, slower, long-term filial love. And so you want to be careful about not taking these filial relationships for granted, not putting them on the back burner, because they're the ones that are steadfast. They're the ones that are always there. They're the ones when you're there in need, they show up for us. And so we shouldn't be so quick to sort of shoo them away or put them at the back of the line when somebody new and exciting and shiny shows up. And likewise, when some people fall in love, they forget their friends and their family. They abandon their community allegiances. And they do this in a sort of a seductive regression, meaning seduction and the carnal excitement of the body becomes much more interesting than the long-term day in and day out relationships that we can rely on. And that's not a bad thing. It's just about keeping it in check, about letting your friends and family know, hey, I'm dating somebody new. And while I really want to go to the movie with you this coming Saturday night, there's a possibility she or he might call. And so can you maybe have a plan B? Are you okay if I cancel on you? Like, be in a conscious conversation and a collaborative conversation with this friend that you love so dearly. Be respectful of that person. Let them know that there's a possibility that you are going to become flaky if you start to get involved with this love relationship. And you also want to be careful about not losing yourself to that love relationship to the extent that all of your friends fall by the wayside. That is a terrible trap. And that's often what we see in people who struggle with love addiction, is that they cannot hold both and. They lose themselves to these new relationships, and that leaves them quite alone and lonely if the relationships don't work out. So ask yourself, do I lose myself to love relationships? And if you do, that may be a yield sign for you to look at that more closely in your therapy and to agree with yourself that you're going to date differently this time, that you're not going to let everything else in your life fall away in service of running after one person. And also, if you're someone who doesn't cultivate your friendships, if you let friendships fall by the wayside and find yourself alone and isolated, you might want to challenge yourself to find out, why do I do that? And if you know why you do it, then the next question is, why do I keep doing that? That's a harder question. Why do I keep doing that when I know it's detrimental to myself? And sometimes shame stands in the way of us picking up the phone and calling an old friend and saying, I miss you. And I'm sorry I dropped the ball in our relationship. And I want to pick it up now if you're available. I recently had this experience with a dear friend of mine, and she was unbelievably gracious because nothing bad happened between the two of us. Our lives just went in different directions. And so we reconnected during the pandemic, initially on Zoom, and now we've been seeing each other in person. And because we have so much history with each other, it's just a delicious, lovely relationship that really never went anyway. It's just that I got preoccupied in that egoic way that Fromm talked about, that it's egoism that has us isolated, because I've got so many other more important things to do than be in relationship with people I love. And after all, loving and being loved is really the most important thing in life. There is nothing else. Oftentimes when people end this isolating fixation, and sometimes that isolating fixation is because of addiction, because people are smoking weed every day, or they're drinking every day, or they're lost in pornography, that's when they seem to come out of hiding and say, what was I thinking? And usually when people get into recovery, this is the hardest part of a first step for them. It's not just surrendering to the fact that they have an addiction. It's surrendering to the fact that they have isolated themselves. And one of the definitions of addiction is being in a mood-altering experience with a substance or a behavior to the degree that you don't have other relationships. It's a pathological relationship with that mood-altering substance or behavior. Pathological meaning problematic. That the sole relationship in my life is food or sex or gambling or drugs or alcohol, and I protect that at all cost. If you're not an addict, but you've been isolating, then you would ask this question, what was I thinking? As you start to lean on family and friends again. And you would be surprised, and we've all had the experience being on the receiving end of it, when somebody shows up that disappeared on us for whatever reasons, and they are apologetic and they want to connect, we're generally pretty open-hearted to that, or we're happy to see them. We open our doors to them, whether it's the door literally to our house or the door to our heart. But friendship, filial love, is a two-way street. It's not just taking. You have to be open to giving. You've got to open your heart, your home, your hearth, and give, because you cannot give or outgive God or higher power or spirit or the goddess or the universe. You just cannot outgive it, because it is an abundant place. It is infinite. And the more we give, the more we receive and get back. Someone is writing here to say, I do my best to not get caught up in this isolation, and I have rich relationships with family and friends outside my love relationship. How do I get my partner to do the same thing so their focus isn't all on me? I suspect I have no control of this, haha. Well, good for you for holding boundaries. And sometimes we can only sort of live our lives by example. And when we live in the way that you're talking about, when you say, I'm going to see my friends or family this weekend, or I'm going to go surfing or play volleyball or whatever the thing is I love to do with my friends, and your partner is left home alone, feeling sorry for themselves or moping, that's their choice. You're not doing that to them, especially if you invite them to come watch my game or come watch me surf or come join me and they don't want to. So by you setting an example of this is what it means to have a rich and full life, and I am not going to, it's not like you're doing it excessively so that you have no relationship with your partner, but you're also not going to fall or get sucked into the vortex of their isolation or being a victim, then they are left with their own issues. And all you can do is say, you know, I'm here if you ever need help or want help with this, or you want to talk about this. If there's any way I can help you, I'm happy to have a conversation. But the true message is I cannot stop living my life in order to accommodate your depression, your isolation, your loneliness, your fear of humanity, your issues with your family of origin, whatever the problem is. We can't do that. And then obviously at some point, if we feel like that person is such a drag on us because they can't shift gears or at least meet halfway, then we have to seriously consider the health of the relationship for ourselves. So these are incredibly complicated situations, especially if one person is infirmed or ill or can't quite keep up with the other. So this is where dialogue and conversation is crucial. And with that, we don't have to exile any form of love to enjoy another form of love. If we possessed an infinite quantity or a single quality of love to offer the world, then what would that be? If you had an infinite quality of love, first of all, do you feel that way? That your heart is so open? And you can take a moment right now to feel into that. How open is your heart right now? Do you feel wounded or shut down or hurt? Or do you feel like your heart chakra is wide open, that you're infinitely willing to give, that there's a generosity coming from you? And that generosity should come with boundaries also. It doesn't mean that you save the world or that you pay every single unhoused person on the street. You can't do that. But are you open to compassion when you see those people? Do you wish them well? And is there a single quality of love that you have to offer to the world? And that's a fun thing to play around with too on any given day. If I had a single quality of love today to offer the world, what would it be? And it might be compassion or loving kindness or joy or empathy, or a recognition of the profound pain there is in the world, and that you're offering to be a beacon of light just by saying hello to people and making eye contact on any given day. What is the way that you share that single quality of love? And maybe it's a quality that changes from day to day. And maybe you just can't keep that up every day. It's just too much giving. But can you give once a month or once a week in that way? Just pick a single quality of love that you're feeling today on August 7th. What is it? And can you say, you know what, today I'm going to meet people with joy or a sense of humor or eye contact that says, I see you. Whatever it is, challenge yourself to be generous and open-hearted and see what comes back to you. Because this leads us to this point that we should really challenge and question the limiting love that sees the couple as us against the world. And if you're not in a coupleship, me against the world, I'm so alone, I got dealt a bad hand, all of those negative thoughts that come crashing in. And it's normal in childhood to feel these feelings of powerlessness and disappointment with caregivers that turn into temporary feelings of rage and rejection and hatred, which is a real victim mentality. Victims have to have all of that darkness internally because people perpetrate from a victim perception. I was talking about this to a friend last night, how the Grinch had a multitude of resentments, and his resentments led him to stealing Christmas. And so you have to ask yourself, how deep are my resentments? How powerless and disappointed do I feel? How much do I wield my resentments as a form of rage against people, whether I sexualize that rage or I monetize that rage? Like, how do I act out my feelings so angry about not getting what I want and need? And what is the antidote to that? Well, the antidote is indeed love. And it starts with loving ourselves, which is so much easier said than done. And it starts with loving other people also, saying, yes, I will go with you to have a cup of coffee, or picking up the phone, even though it feels painful, and getting out of your isolation and starting to allow people to give to you, and paying close attention to the ways that you reject that. That when somebody comes towards you because they want to love you or support you, that you shut them out because you feel too much shame, or you don't feel lovable at all. It's challenging to make ourselves vulnerable, very, very challenging, because we want to live, I think, by this American adage of rugged individualism. And I can do it all myself, and I don't need help, and asking for help is weak, especially if you're male. So see if you can start to work with these constructs internally and really challenge yourself to start to open to friendship, open to the kindness of strangers. For children, when they elicit or they get repeatedly splitting from caregivers, 1 minute they love you, the next minute they're not there, they run hot and cold, the children will start to protect their autonomy, and that can be problematic or traumatic because they're still depending on the adults for survival. And when our capacity for this filial love has been wounded, we can create petty conflicts and easily feel persecuted, as I was saying. So see if you can take some time, if you haven't already, to track back to where this original wound came from, who wounded you initially. And these are not just psychological wounds, they are encoded in our nervous systems also. So it takes time to unwind them. Someone writes, I experienced betrayal in the past where my partner went deep into the addiction when I took time out to connect with friends. I don't know if this contributes to feelings of insecurity when I take time away from current love relationships by doing my own thing, or this is my love addiction. Well, I don't know the answer to that, but because your partner chose to dive deep into their addiction when you took time to connect with friends was a way that they disappeared on themselves, that they were opportunistic in that way, and they just did what they did. It was all they were capable of, and it wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. It's like blaming the rape victim. You were living your life. You didn't know. Maybe there was a part of you that was perfectly okay living in a relationship that was somewhat avoidant, that your partner's unavailability or willingness to be left alone all the time sort of suited whatever your needs or desires were. Maybe they didn't. Maybe you were just so lonely in the relationship, you just kind of packed it with other friends and things to do because that person didn't want to come along that often. But whatever it is, you need to unpack that and get clear about what the dynamic was in that relationship. And if there was any part of it that suited your own avoidant nature. And if so, how can you change that? And so I can see where that you certainly have a little bit of trauma reactions around that if I go out with my friends to lunch on a Saturday, does that mean my partner is going to be cheating on me or spending the entire afternoon looking at pornography? So the only thing you can do is ask your current partner about that. What do they do when you're apart from each other? Who are they seeing? Where are their plans? Both of you should know where each other are and what you're doing and when you're coming back at the end of the day. This is part of being in a secure relationship, that we know transparently all the time where each other is, what they're doing, where their friends are, if for nothing else than safety purposes. Instead of just saying, I'm going to the beach, I'll see you at the end of the day, and then you don't come home at the end of the day. It's like, well, which beach did he or she go to? They're not answering their phone. What if that person doesn't show up for 24 hours? What if something really horrible happened and I have no idea where they are? So I hate to create such a morose scenario, but we live in very bizarre times. And so if nothing more, we should know where each other is for safety and accountability, that I'm going to be gone for 3 hours. I'm going for lunch with a friend, and then we're going to take a walk or go shopping. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to be home exactly 3 hours on the dot, but it's kind of an estimate of what's going on. And I think for you, Allison, you would feel a lot safer and a lot better if you and your partner were in that kind of dialogue. And if you had that kind of accountability with each other, then you could answer that question about whether it's just a slightly traumatic reaction. It also has to do with your trust being broken, or if this is your love addiction. But that's a nice question. And I like the subtle distinction in that also, and that you're really paying attention to yourself. Here's another question. Do you think couples work is overemphasizing themes of safety and being there for each other above healthy differentiation? I'm curious how the trends of couples therapy are impacting this topic. Well, I do think it's a both and situation. And I think it does take a very skilled therapist that understands both attachment and differentiation, because it is a both and thing. We cannot differentiate if we're not securely attached. And we can't securely attach, over time as adults if we can't differentiate and stand on our own 2 feet. We are highly autonomous creatures, but we are highly gregarious creatures also. So the more attached we are, you just think about a secure child, the more attached we are, the more we can differentiate, the greater risks we will take, not carelessness, but risks to try new things because we have a secure base, whether it's our family of origin or our love relationship or our friends. We feel safer in the world. So I do think that we can go overboard in either direction, because going overboard with attachment processes and couples therapy can have people becoming more dependent with each other. And I don't think that is the point of attachment-focused therapy. I think it's about becoming interdependent. Just likewise, if you were in a therapy that was strictly based on differentiation and not attachment, then you can be in an every person for himself dynamic. And so it has to be a blended and integrated model so that it's both and. So as adults, we don't need our flawed caregivers any longer, and we have to allow ourselves to experience deep love, whomever it's for. One of the deepest loves I've ever had has been with pets. Deep, deep falling in love with one of my, I think my first, not my first cat, but one of my cats. I love this animal deeply, and he was a robust indoor-outdoor male cat. He had a very protective energy, and he was my protector in some ways. Now, yes, he was a house cat and he was domesticated, but energetically, this male taught me what it meant to love deeply. And we get deeply attached to pets And sometimes they're our first real love relationships. So I don't want to discount that also. They're with us constantly. They are constant companions. They love us unconditionally, day in and day out through whatever we're going through. They're just there. And we can learn to love with animals. But to transfer that to starting to trust a partner, if you've been deeply wounded, especially if you've been sexually abused by a parent or physically abused, sometimes animals are the safest place to start, but we have to keep going and transfer that love to a partner. And when we allow ourselves to repair problematic relationships, sometimes with family members or friends, and to expand it to our community, that's when we start to feel more integrated and whole. There's another question here. I have a friend who is convinced that healthy relationships mean you don't have to talk about the relationship. Well, I don't know who they think they don't have to talk to about the relationship with. Their friends. That is, healthy relationships are two people who are simply living and loving their lives both apart and together. Yet I've always imagined that relationships require work, especially for people like my husband and myself who came from somewhat traumatic backgrounds. I think, to me, it's oxymoronic, no insult to your friend, that we can be in a healthy relationship and talk and not talk. I think talking is essential, not on a daily basis. It just shouldn't be feeling like you're living in a Cuisinart where you're processing your brains out all the time by any means. There should be an ease to the security of the attachment, a recognition and knowing. But inevitably, life happens. We have existential conundrums and thoughts and questions, and somebody we need to work things out with and wonder what they're thinking about. I mean, if our love relationships are really our best friends, our deepest love, then how can we not ask them to, to talk to us about something that's going on with our parent or a sibling or a job situation? And how does that dovetail into the dynamic between the two of us and how we're there for each other? So I find that unimaginable for me. So maybe I'm more like you and your husband, who feel like I really need that open line of communication and open-heartedness, that just going along frightens me, because I think one day somebody's going to have had a resentment that they didn't talk about, or had some feeling come up that they didn't discuss, or maybe cheated by accident. And that thing is going to come apart and will force people to talk to each other. So regardless of the circumstances of our upbringing, let us cultivate Philia so that along with Eros and Agape, we can weave ourselves with all the strands of love into others, into our world. So in other words, this is a braided form of loving. And, love is such a deep and complicated question, because nobody's ever been able to define it in one way. We all have different definitions of it, and poets have written about it from the beginning of time, and, authors and playwrights. And so if you think about this three-part piece of love, this braid of friendship, of erotic love and spiritual love, and what of those strands are strongest in my life, what would I like to cultivate more? Is there one that's weaker than the other? Or are they all pretty sturdy? Or how do I start to give attention to all three strands? That helps us to be more integrated and loving, I think, as we bring that into the world. So ask yourself today, what feelings do you have towards family, friends, and community? And can you expand your capacity for philia, regardless of whether those in your life deserve it? Can you practice loving kindness and let people go that maybe you're holding a grudge against or resentment, and just let them go? You don't need to give them energy by holding on to them or nursing your resentment. See if you can look at what your part was in what happened in the relationship. Obviously, if this is a long-term relationship or you were terribly betrayed, that doesn't go away that quickly, but you must let it go, because if you can't, you won't be able to open your heart again. It's just like if you had a dear, dear pet that you loved more than anything in the world and lost it, and your heart is broken, to say, I'm never going to have a pet again, or I'm never going to love like that again, is a maladaptive way of coping. And Rilke said, it is better to have loved and lost than to have never loved. And that is one of the challenges in this life, is to keep loving, to have our hearts broken thousands of times, and to dust ourselves up and get up and do it again. And consider the degree to which you balance romantic and platonic relationships, and whether you favor one over the other. Integrate your love experience with your life experience. So have both. Don't get into a love relationship that is so possessive, so cloying, so shut down that you don't get to have friends and hobbies and experiences and, richness in your life, because those are the things that we bring back to the relationship to say, oh my God, I had this amazing experience today with this hobby. Let's say surfing again, because the ocean is very alive in the summer for us. Let me tell you about my day surfing, or let me tell you about my day when I was with my friends painting, and what I learned or what came up for me. Bringing those home is what makes our relationships rich and varied. Or let me tell you the wisdom that my friend shared for me, or the heartache that he or she is going through. This is the tapestry of our lives. And ask yourself, do you rely on certain relationships to absorb the stress of conflicted relationships, past or present? That can make you sort of a bottomless pit, and it's painful for you because that pain is never going to go away unless you address it. So just using other people to temporarily make you feel good, whether you're using them socially or sexually, or you're just tolerating them because you need a warm body to have dinner with, you don't really like them because you just don't want to bear your loneliness, is not healthy love. So care for your own wounds, and then show up for others with kind and courteous love in your heart as a person among people. So my invitation to you on this beautiful summer day is to see what you can do to keep opening your heart, to keep giving generously, without expectation of reciprocity, but just from a place of joy and deep gratitude that you have what you do have, and see if you can spread that filial love, one person at a time. So I wish you a beautiful day and a beautiful month, and I look forward to seeing you in September. Thank you.